Gather around, because we have some Final Fantasy XIV theories for the next expansion, Evercold, in the house, in the building tonight. Oh, and we have some really good ones today, people. Buckle up. We're going to get nerdy with it. Hello, everybody. It's your boy, Jmulls, and let's begin with this. Look, I get it. I understand that some people get tired of all the Zenos talk, but I don't. So our first theory comes courtesy of @Cable7787, who says, if they do bring Zenos back, it'll probably be in an unexpected way, like us meeting his reflection or something of the sort. Bringing him back as completely an antagonistic force again would be kind of cheap in my opinion. I think I generally agree with this. However, my rule of thumb is that most plot points aren't necessarily bad. It largely depends on the way you tell it and the way you pace these plot points and connect them. So if they are going to bring back Zenos again, which is not definitive or anything, we just know they're at least trying to establish a thematic parallel between the Warrior of Light and the way that Zenos was acting and just the way he treated the world overall. If they do want to take this a step further and just bring Zenos back as a character itself, I think there is a way to do it. I think the biggest thing they would have to nail is to make it seem different enough to what has already happened. You don't want to just retread on waters that we've already done. I mean, would I mind that? No, not necessarily, but I still think overall, for the health of the story moving forward, there has to be a clear purpose in bringing it back and not just have it be for fan service. Now, when it comes to the writing team they have, I do tend to trust them. So I can't say I'm particularly worried one way or the other. And yeah, like, the way you perceive and experience a story is going to be inherently subjective. There were a lot of people, I'm not saying you're wrong to feel this way, but there are a lot of people that felt that bringing back Zenos after Stormblood's 0.0 was a bad decision and that it just wasn't compelling for them. People can feel like that, but for me, that was one of my favorite elements of the story moving on from that point in time. Now, I do like to agenda post when it comes to Zenos because I find the character so fun, and look, if they bring him back, I'm gonna pop off, like that's just going to happen. Realistically speaking though, I think the most we would probably get out of Zenos as a character is we either interact with a shot of Zenos, some kind of like reincarnation of him as well, like maybe they could go along those routes. I don't really believe that, but they could. Or what I think is more likely than anything is that we interact with like hallucinations of Zenos, like the Warrior of Light over the course of this journey or whatever, and with like Halmarot, essentially drawing these parallels to how we are acting and the way we are trying to problem solve what is going to come with the way that Zenos acted. I could see the Warrior of Light hallucinating Zenos at certain points in the story moving forward and not have it be an actual Zenos or anything. Like, it's just, like I said, this mental hallucination we like concoct in the recesses of our mind and imagination, and overall personal longing to have a boy and friend back again, kind of like in a similar role to, say, Oddbird in Shadowbringers. Obviously not one for one, but in the way where every now and then when we're alone, we just have this hallucination of Zenos and he basically just taunts us, or possibly nudges us back on track in the right direction, or what we perceive to be the right direction. I think if you just bring Zenos back as a character and you just make him like a Winterer, or you just make him an antagonist again, we've kind of done that before. I guess you could do a story where he comes back in order to save us for whatever reason, but again, that's kind of the big plot twist at the end of Endwalker, so we've done that before. So what else do you got? Could they do it simply for rule of cool? Yeah, sure, they could do that. Would I be necessarily opposed to that? No, so long as it is really dang cool. We just circle back to what I was talking about before. It's like, if you're going to pull this trigger, which to be fair, they have not explicitly stated or indicated that they're going to, but if they do end up pulling that trigger, there has to be purpose and meaning behind it, or you just have to make it really dang cool and fun. Now, having said all of this, I want you to take everything I just said, throw it out the window, and just bring me back Zenos. That's all I'm asking for. Give me a skin for Reaper where I can replace the Void Scent with Zenos, and I want voice lines as well, people. Square Enix, I need you to get on it. Now let's talk Final Fantasy VII, and for that, we have a theory from @MavFair, who says, a theory for open world content. Square Enix would more than likely add a Final Fantasy VII event akin to the 13, 15, and 16 events in a crossover event for the Final Fantasy VII Part 3 launch. And if Square Enix's pattern for characters is missing from the world for a time, example Lightning between 13 and 13-2, or Noctis during his 10-year sleep and appears in Eorzea, this event for Final Fantasy Fantasy VII would be when Cloud goes through his time in the wheelchair and both him and Tifa fall into the life stream pit. That would be the ideal time for them to have the event for 14, where the Warrior of Light helps Cloud find himself as more than a reflection of Zack. Look, when someone cooks, they cook. It does kind of feel like it's inevitable for us to get a collab with Final Fantasy VII, especially like how this theory points out we're going to have Final Fantasy VII Part 3 in all likelihood next year for the 30-year anniversary of Final Fantasy VII. And while the collab story is never really too involved that much, I've only done the 15 and 16 ones though for Final Fantasy. I think they're a fun little journey, and just having some kind of little adventuring go on with Cloud and possibly even Tifa, I'm just saying, in that one bit in the game when they fall into the live stream, that could be really dang cool. I'm just saying. Now there's a bunch of different things they could use for like a mount reward maybe. I think Red 13 would be really funny, but I do think there's another element to this we have to consider, and that is when it comes to Evercold, they've talked about mixing up the open world content a bit. And we talked about last week, like maybe they could incorporate stuff from like Occult Crescent into the open world zones. So maybe when we get another collab with another Final Fantasy game like Final Fantasy VII, if this is a post Evercold release, maybe the content we could get could be a little bit more involved than what we're used to. Again, I'm not expecting the moon or anything, just a little bit though. I think that could be really fun. Also, because of Evercold, they are going to introduce a system where we're going to be able to change our animations for our jobs. Maybe we could get like animation suites for Cloud and possibly Tifa, you know, Tifa for like Monk, that you could acquire by doing this crossover event. Like that could be so dang cool, man. Now it's entirely possible all we get is like a triple triad card and like one glam set. Yeah, sure, that's possible, but I dare to dream. Next up, we have a theory after my own heart. We have at SepHero9639 who says, my joke theory is that it isn't actually floating islands. Instead, they copy Xenoblade 2, and the zones we see are just on these floating discs above the gigantic monsters XD. Now, I gotta log in here since Xenoblade 2 is one of my favorite games. So what are we talking about here? We have the Arcane Colossi of Unknown Providence. I totally have never talked about this guy before. And he's basically one of those giant, well, colossi that were all over the Evercold trailer. And you can see the very top of his head up there. There's a giant disc. Now, this dude appears to be rather large. I mean, look, this dude's either flying or he's on all fours and still above the cloud layer or the mist layer. Depends upon like how high they want this to actually be. Still, point is, this is one giant dude. And it is kind of similar to Xenoblade 2 when you think about it. I mean, Xenoblade 2 is all about these giant titans in a sea of clouds, and people have built civilizations on the backs of those titans. Obviously, it's not one for one here, but there is a parallel to be had here. And there's also something rather interesting here. When they showed off the artwork for the zones, the cities, the dungeons for Evercold, we know they're on a bunch of sky islands. The main trailer told us so. They took their civilizations and took them to the sky to evade essentially snowball Earth that's going on. We never see the full sky island though in like any of this artwork. Not in this city, not in this one, not really in the concept art for any of these dungeons either. I mean, you can see some detail in the distance of the top right one and the top left one out to the right here. Like right around here, you can see a little bit of detail, but not much. And then we go to the screenshots. It's like, we don't see the full sky island. We only see scenery from this location. Same with this one. These images look awesome. Don't get me wrong. We see a bit more here, but we don't see the bottom of this ravine or this cliff or whatever this is. These screenshots are taken in a very specific way. Look at this one. There's a giant wall on the left over there, but again, we don't see over the edge of the sky island. We see a bit more here, but not enough to go off of. Same with this one. This one's pointed more up. It's large and grandiose in its scale, sure, but what's below us? We see a little bit below us here in this one, but this looks more like a tiered city or some kind of high altitude location upon this sky island, and we can see the buildings and the features of a tier below us here. We're not seeing over the edge of what we assume to be a sky island. So what are we on? Like, the best that we get in the trailer itself is the scene with Media, Estanian, and Alphino, but these islands are far too small to be the ones that that we've seen in the other screenshots and the like. Sure, these are Sky Islands, but who's to say this is the fourth? Why couldn't this be the Sea of Clouds in Eorzea? Not Eorzea, but like, actually, yes, Eorzea. Basically where Ishgard is, right? In Heavensward. It could be that zone, or something very similar to it. It doesn't have to be the fourth. I mean, it might be, but these islands are far too small to be those other main zones we've seen so far. And also, let's pay attention to the wording here. The Colossi form, they come, the world gets overtaken by ice, and then they flee to the sky. And they don't show what that looks like. And we know the island thing isn't unique to the Colossi from that one image on the website, because they added here in the trailer as well. This guy has it. That guy has it as well. It's starting to form in the other ones here, but we pan upwards too quickly. So it's not a unique trait to that one arcane Colossi. And sure, the scale doesn't seem to be that impressive from this trailer, but we gotta remember, this section is very artistically inspired. This isn't how it's going to look in-game, and who's to say these things don't grow after the fact? Maybe it could be like a Xenoblade 2 situation where we have this entire empire on the back of this giant titan moving through a sea of clouds. Maybe it could be something like this, for instance. Ignore the fall damage I'm about to take. Maybe we could have something like the Leftherian Archipelago with a bunch of different monsters clustered together, and we can live off the backs of all of them. Maybe it could be something like this. Perhaps like Gormott. Like, look how big and spacious this place is. It looks awesome. And look, there's the Titan right there. So like, maybe we could have this kind of an effect in Final Fantasy XIV. It's possible. And I think narratively, symbolically, it could be a very interesting plot twist that we could have, where on the backs of the very beings that we assume plunge the world of the fourth into this perpetual icy state that destroyed the world and brought sorrow in its wake, life thrives on top of them, on their very backs, on those discs that form above them. I think thematically that could be so dang cool. And I'm honestly kind of kicking myself that I never thought of this myself. And the funny thing is, I could easily see this being a plot twist they revealed like a future fan fest like Berlin or Tokyo, where maybe one of the future trailers, and by that I mean the trailer that we got with additional scenes, has this panning shot of one of these colossi, goes all the way to its top, and we see a giant floating city up there. I could see that being a reveal they do. I don't know. I think it's very possible. Oh god, now I'm thinking like, if that's the case, and in order to stop like this permafrost effect on the fourth, we have to actually defeat the colossi. If we defeat the colossi, what would happen to the people that live on top of it? Our act of trying to save the world could doom its people. That could be a really interesting thread to pull on. I'd be down for this entirely. Next up, we have @Captain Envy, who says, I feel like something people are missing is that every time a shard rejoins with the source, it triggers a calamity. Every single calamity, minus the most recent one that led to a realm reborn, was utterly catastrophic and largely wiped out most, if not all, civilizations, and kinda reset everything as the various races are forced to rebuild. The seventh calamity, though, was partially stopped in a way because Bahamut was destroyed by Louis Soir, and even then, Eorzea was hit quite hard and lots of death. Now, how exactly could they have another calamity happen on Aetherius now? They can't alter the game world as they would affect all previous content other than something akin to the final days that have lots of death just implied. So honestly, I don't think any shards will rejoin, and we will find some way to stabilize them or disconnect them from the source solstice. Funnily enough, I do kind of agree with this. I don't think they're going to really pull the trigger and have some kind of massive calamity happen on the source. I just don't see them doing that. Unless there is specifically an expansion, kind of like World of Warcraft Cataclysm, where they basically just remake the game world. I guess what they could do is just have it be like a separate tab in the teleport section, where if you want to go back to the old game world from a Realm Reborn to whenever this would happen, you could do that, or you can just teleport to what it's like now. I guess they could do something along those lines. You could make the argument, how could you justify that for like lore purposes? I personally don't really see it as being like that big of a deal. You could just have that be non-canonical and just have it be that anytime we go back to the past, it's actually the Warrior of Light doing something from back in the day. But going back to what I was just talking about, I don't really see them doing this. They could, I just don't think it's likely. I think they would rather us to go to new places and explore those places instead of retreading on places that we've already been to. There's still other shards for us to fully explore. We haven't even like fully done the fourth yet. it. Like, that's the next expansion. There's still other shards out there, and there's still large swaths of Aetherius we just have not been to. I mean, like, we've been to parts of Tyrol, sure. There's still large sects of that entire continent that we just haven't been to yet. Not to mention most of Ilsabad and, like, Hingashi, Miracidia. There's still so many places we haven't been to. I feel like they would prioritize us going to those places instead of just saying, let's go back to the 12's Wood, let's go back to Ul'dah. Now, could they write some kind of large cataclysmic-esque event that doesn't require them to redo the game world? I think it's possible, and they almost pulled the trigger on it back in Shadowbringers, where the calamity that was going to happen that we prevented back in Shadowbringers was that, like, toxic gas, right? Now, you could argue that over time it would do more, like, ecological damage as well, and you would have to rewrite the zones according to that. Sure, you can say that. But I think what that represents is that not every calamity has to necessarily be something that impacts the world in, like, a very kinetic way. It doesn't have to be some giant fire or a bunch of lightning strikes or some giant, like, blizzard or a giant flood. It could just be like a bunch of poison gas. So maybe a calamity they could do could be some kind of disease. It could be some kind of disease, maybe like a swarm of locusts. Maybe you could go like full Moses and just like have some kind of angelic, mysterious being come by and just start killing people. I think there's ways to do a calamity that feels very impactful and large in scope without necessarily altering the world and the zones themselves. Now, granted, there's one that is like, to me, inevitable. At some point, they gotta pull media, right? It's like, yeah, you could technically say maybe Bahamut fits that bill, but that's not like the Final Fantasy VII media, right? Now, their logic could be, and I'd actually kind of agree with this, maybe it's not a good idea to take one of the most recognizable events from Final Fantasy history, which is the media from Final Fantasy VII, and just try to redo that plot point in Final Fantasy XIV, especially with the remake games going on right now. I would actually kind of agree with that, and I don't think they necessarily need to pull that trigger. But again, they could do something like that, and maybe we could avert the media. Or possibly just redirect the media, have the Lopritz deal with it. I mean, that's possible. I do feel like at some point we have to get close to another calamity, because if we just don't, how threatening will the Winterers actually feel? If their goal is to trigger a bunch of calamities and they never get even remotely close to one, what are we doing here, right? Like, at some point, I'm not saying Evercold has to pull this trigger or anything like that, but at some point, one Winter has to be pretty dang close. I do kind of agree, though. I think if we ever do cross that bridge at some point, it'd probably be handled like the final days were back in Endwalker, where there's a lot of implied death. We have like a few scenes that are pretty gnarly, but after those cutscenes are finished, I imagine things will probably just kind of look the same. I don't really see them just wiping out an entire zone or anything like that. It would be ballsy. I'd be in favor of them doing something like that. I just don't really see them ever pulling that trigger, or if they do, they would give us some way to go back to that zone so we could do like quests and whatnot. Though it does still kind of feel to me that like Ultima Thule changing over the course of the zone, and also Living Memory changing so significantly over the patches, that to me kind of feels like they're beta testing something. Obviously not beta testing in like the most literal sense of the words, but it just feels as if they're like saying, hey, how do people feel about this? How far can we push this like tech that we have? Maybe they let up in the future, or maybe it's pedal to the metal. Time will tell. Next up, let's talk tanks. We have at Tisa Touch, who says, something a wild, a Hail Mary, if you will. A new tank is going to be Hori Boulder. He's a giant rogue that's been a scion since A Realm Reborn, and with a new tank class coming in and not one of the scions can take it, it'll be him. Each trailer since Shadowbringers has showed one of the scions picking up the new job. Hence, a guy Boulder will be that guy. Arguably, since Stormblood, each scion has picked up a new job, but the trailer didn't showcase Red Mage at all, sorry Alize. As far as main story quest at MSQ, the old Aura man is going to be a sympathetic villain. His eyes are tired, his demeanor is that of that pure exhaustion and hopelessness. I'm betting him and the female Aura are important, like a wife or a sister, and we're at odds and somehow created the winter on the 4th. The woman taking responsibility for it kept it at bay so it didn't take over the entire reflection, giving mankind a means of escape. A lot like Minfilia in the first. The Aura man is our second on, but no redemption will be found for him. I've said this before, I am kind of convinced the main tank coming in Evercold is just going to be like a dual gun shield kind of thing. It's going to be a main tank. That just makes a lot of sense to me. But even if it's something like shield and giant hammer, or even just giant hammer, aesthetically that just works for a character like Hoary Boulder. Just some big dude with a lot of meat, give him a giant weapon, Bob's your uncle, make him a main tank. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. It wouldn't surprise me either if one of the expanded scenes we get for the Evercold trailer, one of the future fan fests, is that one scene of like Media, Estate, and Alphino, and like the expanded scene is like Hoary Boulder coming through the gate as well as the new tank to like back us up, because technically no one in that party is a tank. Estate and the Warrior of Light are melee DPS, Alphino's the healer, there still has to be a tank. Make it Dude City, you bring in Hoary Boulder as the tank, there you go. That makes a lot of sense to me. Now for the old guy in the trailer. There's a few things that I'm rather certain of when it comes to Evercold. They're gonna really play on Final Fantasy VII. I'm convinced this character is the Aerith stand-in for the expansion. Kind of like in the same way to where like Sphene was the Garnet stand-in from Final Fantasy IX. That dude though, I definitely agree this guy's the Winterer. I talked about this before, but just the way he contrasts with Halmarud and also Calyx. At some point, they're gonna make us feel as if Winter is a really big threat, and I just feel as if Calyx and Halmarud right now don't really fit that bill. Some dude like this could add a lot of seriousness to the Winterers. Because I mean, come on. It's like, I love Halmarud and Calyx right now. It's hard to take them seriously when Calyx is right there with the squirrel outfit. That guy goes a long way depending upon where his story takes us. Just like overall demeanor though, the way this dude looks, the way he carries himself, I feel like it's a slam dunk. Now, I have seen a lot of takes, because I've also covered them myself, that this could be like a Halmarud shard or just like something related to Halmarud. I mean, she does look very similar. There are some differences. Halmarud that we have doesn't have that thing on her forehead. Also, I'm pretty sure when we looked into this on stream, the scales on the side of the head don't like exactly line up with in-game Halmarud, though it could be a stylistic change for the trailer. I don't think this is just the Halmarud that we know, unless there was some kind of bodily change there. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a connection to some way, or like some degree with Halmarud here. That wouldn't surprise me. I think the main question though is whether or not this character is even alive, because like, yeah, they just kind of Spider-Man away here and just turn to like snowflakes. So it's entirely possible this is just already essentially the bad ending for him. And I guess it also works because in Final Fantasy VII, Aerith dies. If that character is supposed to be a stand-in for Aerith, maybe she's already dead. That, or he thinks she's dead. Or eventually her spirit would go on and be like reclaimed by Halmarud, or utilized by Halmarud, or just became Halmarud, something along those lines. There's a lot of different directions they can go with this. On a side note though, I do think it says something with just like how much conversation this small little scene here has like brought up ever since this teaser trailer came out. It only lasts a few seconds, but like these characters are talked about like everywhere, man. I'm really interested to find out more about this guy particularly. Now here's where you come in. We still have a bit of time until the Berlin Fan Fest, so it's time to get our theories in play, people. Let's throw a million things at the wall and see if any of them can stick. Leave your wildest, your craziest theories in the comments down below, and I may react to them in a future video. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And the theory train has no brakes, people. Choo choo! Charlie is leaving the station. You want to see even more theories that may be on the mark? Check out this video right here for more. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye, everybody. Until we meet again.